Amanda says that everybody can tell when I have a new commentary because I keep quoting that person. Well, another quote from Michael Carr. He calls this one of the unmiraculous miracles. Unmiraculous in that it's totally downplayed. There's no making mud and putting it on their eyes and suddenly they see. There's no great pronouncement that you are well. Just go. Go show yourself to the priest. And about as low-key as it can be. Although we don't know how emphatic or loud that go was. Now, why show yourself to the priest? Well, that goes back to Leviticus 13 and 14. Leprosy was a dreaded skin disease that could take somebody's life. It caused open wounds on arms, hands, faces, any parts of the body, and with those open wounds came infection. And they didn't have the medicines we do now. And so people could easily die from that disease. And so to control it, they did it much as the same way America controlled diseases in the 40s and 50s. And before that, they put up a quarantine sign. America put quarantine signs and people would go and leave food on the porch. And then people would bring it in. Only in that day and age, there were no porches. They were still in tents. And in fact, the tents were all in by tribes, and in the center of it was the tent of the tabernacle, where God was thought to reside, and God did reside. And one of the great things about being a leopard was that you had to live outside the camp, so that you would not infect anybody else. That's why these 10 leopards did not come near Jesus. That's why nobody came near them. While they were still off at a distance, they lowered their heads and yelled, "Jesus, Master, have mercy." They did that because of the requirements back in that day. The requirements were that if you were diagnosed with leprosy, you had to stay outside and you had to have your clothes torn and your hair disheveled. I know some would say that's a fashion statement. But you also had to stay away from people and yell unclean, so that nobody made the mistake of coming near to them and getting the disease. That's how the disease was controlled. The leopards knew they only had a chance, and they showed a great amount of faith. In that, one, they approached Jesus. When Jesus came, they yelled out and called on him, hoping that he would heal them. And then when he said, "Go and show yourself," they took that action seriously, that command seriously, and they went. They didn't say, no, we want you to heal us. They went. And here's one of the areas that the way God works. Oftentimes, when God is about to do something, he tells people to do, and then I'll show up. When the the nation of Israel was getting ready to go into the promised land, they were told, "I will stop up the Jordan River. So you have the priest with the Ark of the Covenant, step out in the waters, and then I'll stop it." He told Gideon, your army's too big, get rid of more of them. Get rid of them, I'll go down to 300. Now go and encircle this huge camp of thousands of the enemy, and then I'll give you victory. Only after the obedience was done does God deliver. This is an approach that God has. He has people step out in the commands he's given. He has them live out that faith and really walk in it for a while before the miracle shows up. Now, that's not the way we like to work. Most of us prefer to have everything lined up perfectly. Nice big safety rails along the sides, and no real question about what's going to happen. And then when everything's ready, we'll walk that way. No, God says, you walk that way, and then I'll show up. Then I'll act. He requires us to actually walk in our faith. The good news is that when we do this and then God shows up, we build a tremendous trust level that God will do this. Many of the Psalms talk about this kind of a relationship. I will tell in the tabernacles of what God has done, how He has delivered me. I will tell. That element of them being called to do. Whether it's to live out the way the Scripture tells us to live, or whether that's that command to go or to do. But when God shows up, then people have that element of telling. Well, that's what the psalmist does. I'll remind you that there were 10 lepers. And only one came back to give thanks to Jesus. Now, to be honest, the others were in that process of getting declared clean so that they could be around people again. It was not just a, here I am, I'm clean, I get to go back in the community. Oh no, it's over a week's process. They had to show themselves, get approved by the priest that they were clean. They had to wash, they had to shave, they had to put on different clothes, and then they could go and be in their community. But they couldn't go back into their tent. After a week of not being in that tent, they were then shown themselves again to the priest and had to be examined. And every time they showed the priest and they were declared clean, they had to give an offering. And then after the second time, they had to shave their hair. And I don't mean just a little bit up here, a little off the sides. They even had to shave their eyebrows. And then they would clean, and then they would be part of the community again. They would be officially, completely clean. And that is what this group of 9 were in the process of doing. And sometimes that's what happens when God interacts. We get so busy with all the details that life now has. We forget to deal with the reality of God has acted. It's not unheard of that God has acted and people go, phew, that was nice. And really fail to give thanks to God for what He's doing. Admittedly, sometimes when we're working and we're waiting for God to act, it's like, is He ever going to do anything? Is He ever? But when He does, we have that opportunity to give thanks. One of the other great things is when we do give thanks, there's a benefit. Because we acknowledge that God has worked. And when we acknowledge that, that increases our faith. And in this case of the Samaritan, who came back and gave praise after Jesus said, where are the other 9? Weren't 10 cleansed? He then talks about how this man's faith has made him well. Now it's interesting, all 10 of them were cleansed from the leprosy. So aren't they well? All all 10 of them are cleansed. Now the literal wording for made well includes you are saved. But considering how leprosy could easily lead to death back then, that seems appropriate to be made well. But when you talk about someone being saved, that is that element as we walk in our faith and give God great praise and thanks for what He's doing, it builds up our faith and then our assurance of our faith, so that it does not dissipate over time. Many of the psalm talks about how we are going to give thanks and pay the vows that we have made. The reality is, giving thanks is a way of acknowledging what God has done, but also proclaiming it in such a way that we remember it better. Sometimes we remember our statements about things more than we remember the event, because we have to put it succinctly. Here's what happened. Here's how God's acted. Now I give thanks. Rather than just let the events go by so fast that we forget about them. This unmiraculous miracle is the story of Jesus having mercy on 10 men. And then the reality that only one of them thought to come and acknowledge Him. Now, from a totally theological perspective, it's kind of neat. Only the foreigner has the real sense to acknowledge Jesus as the priest. In the Old Testament, there were 3 major roles: prophet, king, and priest. And the understanding of Scripture is that Jesus fulfills all 3 of these roles. He is the great prophet who proclaims of the Father. He is the priest who mediates between us and God. He's the one that makes that offering that takes away the sins. And He is the one who will reign in the future. But here, Jesus said, go and see the priest. The man realizes that he has been made well by Jesus. And so he goes and gives thanks at Jesus' feet to the priest, who not only can proclaim him well, but made him well. So Jesus is being proclaimed as the high priest. In the book of Hebrew, it calls Jesus the great high priest. The one who makes the final and complete sacrifice that removes any barrier between us and God. And here, it was the foreigner, the Samaritan, who recognized that Jesus was the one who brought him back, who restored him, who healed him, who cleansed him. And he gives thanks. Let us give thanks to God for the good He is doing in our time and in our lives.